I'd like to call to order the Transportation Committee meeting. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Moore. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
Alderman Muhammad.
Here.
Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
6 present.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone, and thank you for coming out for this public hearing. I think it's critical that the public has an opportunity to speak their piece, and we are going to have a couple of things that I'd like to share with you before we get started. This meeting is just a hearing. We are doing our due diligence, as you know we have done in the past. Anytime we have anything of critical importance, we always make sure we have public hearings, and we will have 3 public hearings. This is the first one tonight. We'll make sure that we have one in the southern part of the city and one in the northern part of the city. And this one is satisfying the central corridor here. So hopefully if people can't make one, they can make the other. We're doing one on a Saturday morning for some people who work and go to school and maybe not able to do an evening meeting. So hopefully all those who have concerns can be here before the body and voice their concerns directly. We will also like for us today to allow you to speak for 3 minutes. Our committee woman, Carol Howard, is going to be the timekeeper. And what we can do is, if we still have time at the end of the time period allotted for this meeting, which is proposed to end at 8:15, then you can have a second round, okay? For those who just believe that they just missed something very, very important that needs to be heard. The other thing we'd like to do today is to make sure that we're very polite to each other. It is important that we all can hear when someone is speaking. It's important for us to make sure that we are not using unnecessary language that is beyond just simple English. I don't want to say to anyone that your foul language will not be accepted. I don't want to have to say your outbursts, if you're not at the podium, is not acceptable. I don't want to have to say any of that because I think that we can conduct ourselves accordingly. It's important for the committee members to be able to hear this. They are a part of this process as we move forward, and we must make sure that they can get all the information that you want them to have. The other part to this, too, is most of the members of this committee have had opportunities to visit the airport, speak directly with the airport director, also had an opportunity to speak with the FAA, and for any of those conversations that you would like to have direct information on, please make sure that you go to the websites that are available. I think we've passed out the information for you. STL TV, YouTube, has every Transportation Committee meeting. It's taped. You can sit there and watch the words come directly out of the leadership's mouth, not ours. You don't have to take anything for truth that we say if you don't want to. Also, for the expiration process, every one of those meetings are taped as well and also transcribed. So you can also go to the portal that has all that information in it. All the documents are downloaded there that we will be analyzing in the future. So I want you to know that you are definitely in a position to be a part of the process and knowing all information as we know it. For those who may not have had an opportunity to hear this, there is a working group from the City of St. Louis that is comprised of a member of the Comptroller's Office, the Mayor's Office, our Budget Director, our financial analyst from the Board of Aldermen, and myself. We are responsible for making sure that any information that goes out to you is appropriate, thorough, and as accurate as possible. We had a couple of hiccups early on, and you can see, if you've been paying attention, we rectified that because we don't need anybody getting ahead of anything, and most especially not getting ahead of us on your behalf. We are going to hear Board Bill number 93 this evening, and we will have an opportunity for the board sponsor to come, explain the bill to you, and then after that, you will have an opportunity to speak, whether you're pro or con, whichever one you signed up for today. I'll say again, there'll be 2 more public meetings. One will be October 13th, that's a Saturday, at 10 a.m. at St. John the Baptist at 4200 Delore. And there'll be another meeting on October 15th, that's a Monday, at Greater Pentecostal Church at 6080 West Florissant. Of course, as usual, that'll be posted on our website for the Board of Aldermen, on our calendars, and a lot of you all follow anyway. And we will also try to find some other opportunities to get that information out too. There are, for those who have never been down here before, we have restrooms on the end of this quarter here, and I think, are they locked now? Okay. Lisa, raise your hand. Lisa has the key. So we can, we want to make sure we take care of that. We have some additional board members here, members of the Board of Aldermen. We will not be asking questions of you tonight. This is for you. This time is for you. And so we want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. And at 3 minutes, I think we'll be able to cover that tonight. So we won't be asking any questions of you at all. We will be taking notes. If there's a particular document or information that you ask for, we'll make sure that we get that information back to you. Again, Lisa is sitting right here. If you have a business card or you want to give her your email and your name because you want something directed back to you, please feel free to do that. I think I covered everything that we needed to cover to get started.
We will not be taking questions.
No, we will not be taking questions. We will not answer questions tonight because that's not fair to the public. You know, we can get long-winded sometime and maybe only 2 people get to speak, so no, we're not going to do that. We also want to make sure that the time is, you get your full 3 minutes, so Alderwoman Howard is going to make sure she's going to watch that for us. So now I'd like to ask the sponsor of Board Bill 93, Alderwoman Carr Spencer, to come forward and present her bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Transportation and Commerce Committee. I want to first commend the committee and the chairman for hosting this meeting in the evening to accommodate the general public. Thank you for that. I think it's a really, as you mentioned, a very important topic and one in which the general public really appreciates the opportunity to weigh in. So it's not incredibly usual that we have nighttime hearings, and this is an important topic, and so thank you for hosting an evening meeting on behalf of this board bill. What we have before us is Board Bill 93, a bill that will require a public vote before we as a city move forward with the privatization of St. Louis Lambert International Airport, our city's largest public asset. In order for us to discuss why it is important for the public to vote on such an issue, we must first describe briefly what privatization actually is. In 1996, the U.S. Congress established the Airport Privatization Pilot Program, details of which can be found in Section 149 of the Federal Aviation Reauthorization Act of 1996. Participation in this program over the last 22 years since its inception has been extraordinarily limited, in part because major stakeholders have different, if not contradictory, objectives and interests in the process. In fact, only 2 United States U.S. commercial service airports have completed the privatization process established under the Airport Privatization Pilot Program out of a total of well over 400 municipal airports. Of those, 2, Stewart International Airport in New York State subsequently reverted back to public ownership. Luis Munoz Marin International Airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico is now the only airport with a private operator. As of last year, there were 3 active participants in the airport privatization pilot program. Hendry County Everglades Airport in Clewiston, Florida, wherever that is, Westchester County Airport in White Plains, New York, and of course, St. Louis Lambert International Airport here in St. Louis, Missouri. Lambert is one of the most historic airports in the United States, as we all know. In 1928, St. Louis city voters approved a $2 million bond issue for the purchase of Lambert Airport and its improvements, including runways, taxiways, et cetera. And because of this early investment on the part of St. Louis city taxpayers for the construction and the purchase of the airport, we are grandfathered into a revenue sharing program whereby the city enjoys a revenue of almost $7 million a year in direct revenue from Lambert to our general fund. This is an income that is in serious jeopardy if we do decide to privatize, and one that is spectacularly unusual given that just 12 out of the nation's 450 some odd municipal airports enjoy such an arrangement. So why would we put that $7 million a year at risk, and what is airport privatization? The word privatization refers to the shifting of government function and responsibilities and sometimes ownership in whole or in part from the public to the private sector. Many public airports privatize many aspects of their airport currently without handing over the full reins to a private entity. For example, service contracts. Many U.S. airports, including Lambert, outsource non-core operations to private firms that specialize in those functions. Examples include landscaping, bus shuttles, and concessions. Airports may even engage with the expertise of the private sector by contracting specific facilities or responsibilities such as parking, terminal concessions, terminal operations, and refueling to private operators. In some cases, a private management company has been awarded a contract to manage the entire airport for a specific term. This is a form of partial privatization. AV Ports out of Virginia, for example, has management service contracts with a number of airports, including Albany International and Westchester County. So if what we want to do is engage with the private sector on airport management, this can be done on a partial privatization basis without fully privatizing our airport in the way that St. Louis is currently exploring for our international airport. Airports are also able to privatize financing, operations, and maintenance services. For example, Terminal 5 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport and Terminal 4 at New York John F. Kennedy International Airports are both examples of U.S. airports that haven't fully privatized but have privatized their financing operations. But what we are talking about here in St. Louis is full privatization. This is a whole new level. It is described as the sale or long-term lease of an airport to a private owner or operator, and there are some very significant differences between full privatization and partial. One of the most significant of which is the use of sale and lease proceeds. Under non or partial privatization, the sale or lease of properties currently owned by an airport are considered airport revenue and must be used for airport purposes. Under full privatization, however, airports can request the Department of Transportation approve the sale and lease of properties to be considered for other purposes, including profits to the operator. St. Louis Lambert International Airport has an enormous amount of currently unused property around its facility, making the sale or lease of that property a potentially very lucrative endeavor for the private sector. Other important considerations. Public operators are eligible for federal grants for major infrastructure improvements, and Lambert is the recipient of a lot of federal dollars to improve our current airport. Private operators under semi-privatization are eligible for these grants under certain conditions, but under full privatization, the private operator, while they are eligible for those grants, it is at a lower federal amount. This means that as a region, we could lose significant federal dollars for the upgrade of our infrastructure. Rates and/or charges on airlines under non- or partial privatization, rates and charges for airlines must be reasonable pursuant to grant assurances and they must follow federal guidelines. Under full privatization, however, rates may rise without a cap with the consent of 65% of airlines. In the case of St. Louis, this could be disastrous for international travel. As we know, Southwest Airlines is our largest flight provider currently, providing well over 50% of the flights coming in and out of Lambert. If a private operator, for example, wanted to increase charges on international flights to subsidize domestic flights, given the share of our domestic flight providers here that currently occupy our airport, this could be an attractive option for the 65% of our airlines. And while decreasing costs for domestic flights by increasing costs for international flights may be good for our current airline usage, this would not be good for the economic growth of the St. Louis region. In fact, I would argue that a lack of international flight options is a major hurdle to driving economic development in the St. Louis region right now. Likewise, charges on passengers under non- or partial privatization, a private operator is not authorized to impose or collect used passenger facility charges, but under full privatization, a private operator is authorized to impose, collect, and use revenue from passenger facility charges. This could greatly increase the cost of landing in St. Louis, leaving from St. Louis, and even passing through St. Louis on a connection as a consumer. And this could have major impacts on choice of where you fly to and from and through. As I mentioned earlier, participation in the airport privatization pilot program has been very limited. Since its inception, just 12 airports have applied to enter the airport privatization pilot program, but only 2 have completed the process. 1 has backed out, and the other, which is still under that private operator, has success which is debatable. So how will this affect St. Louis? Let's look at history. The city of St. Louis was once the 4th largest in the nation. Our city lost its competitive edge in large part because we lost our transportation advantage. As railroads displaced our riverboats as a primary means of transportation in the United States, St. Louis leaders at that time bowed to existing business interests of the riverboat industry and secretly stifled railroad development to protect the riverboat industry. Chicago, on the other hand, aggressively prepared for the changing economy, and now we are where we are today, where Chicago is literally 10 times the size of our city. Airports are the railroads of the 21st century. The world economy will be increasingly moving by air. The International Air Transport Association projects a doubling of international air service in the next 20 years. Large airports in the nation's midsection, where we are right here, Chicago, Dallas, and Denver, are all currently leading the nation in delayed and canceled flights. In fact, around 30% of all flights are canceled or delayed in those midsection airports. These airports are not capable of absorbing the doubling of international flights or the resulting increase of domestic flights that will accommodate that. So there is really no doubt that the Midwest will need additional air capacity, and the St. Louis region is uniquely positioned to fill that need. We have not 1, but 2 international airports here in the St. Louis region, Lambert and Mid-America, which is just across the river in Illinois, both of which have plenty of room to grow, and they are almost entirely connected by a Metrolink, which could mean secure, seamless transfer without a second trip through security. Neither London with Gatwick and Heathrow nor Chicago with O'Hare and Midway can offer that convenience. We are uniquely positioned to accommodate that. So as we look to our airport's future, we should be looking at creating a regional transportation development plan, maybe even a regional airport authority. But we should most importantly be coordinating the growth of passenger and cargo capacity in the Midwest here in St. Louis. We need to put St. Louis back in the mainstream of the international economy. Our regional population and our regional economy has been stagnant for many decades, my entire lifetime. In fact, since 1970, the St. Louis regional economy and its population has not grown at all. It has been stagnant. We are a population of 3 million people, and if we had just kept up with the national population average increase, we would be a region of 4.5 million people. We are sitting on an opportunity for the region to strategically reposition itself as a center for international aviation. And what we are asking is, should we privatize our airport? But this is the wrong question. We should be asking, we shouldn't be asking, can we make a quick buck for our city by privatizing our airport? We should be asking, how can our region's aviation assets be used to maximize the growth of our regional economy? And so far, the process of even considering privatization has been funded exclusively by Rex Sinquefield. And this wasn't about a lack of money. When we asked ourselves if we needed turnstiles at Metrolink, we magically found $3.6 million to study that. Letting Sinquefield run the study is about letting special interests ask the questions and then answer them. There have been a lot of documented conflicts of interest thus far in this process. This is not a process the City of St. Louis should be proud of. It has lacked accountability and transparency, and most importantly, it has lacked public engagement and public involvement. The current public engagement, the door-to-door campaign, is heavily funded. Obviously, that costs a lot of money. And it is designed to take in concerns rather than provide real insight into the reasons why we are even considering this option and what St. Louis might gain from it. Not to mention that St. Louis County residents have been entirely excluded from this process. While the city does own and operate St. Louis Lambert International Airport, it is a regional amenity. It serves the entire region of St. Louis, which the city makes up just less than 10% of the entire population. Giving the city voting public a say in the result here will provide the means by which to have a public dialogue that will necessarily engage and inform the larger public. This is critical to moving forward a proposal of this magnitude. And for that reason, we need to have a public vote. I think that the public has been overwhelmingly skeptical of the process, has expressed dismay at the well-documented conflicts of interest, and deserves to have their voices heard, not just here today, but by way of a vote on whether or not we move forward with a process that would put us at just number 2 in the nation, a guinea pig, in a process that is literally called the Airport Privatization Pilot Program by the Federal Aviation Authority. And this is we don't have room in our stagnant St. Louis regional economy to take such wild gambles. That is all I have, and I can take questions or I can sit down and let the general public weigh in.
I wanted to ask the committee, is there any questions you just have to ask now? You do have one you have to ask now, okay. Alderman Vaccaro.
I do. I was looking for the fiscal note. All the bills need a fiscal note. And I had questions on this because why wouldn't this be put on a ballot in April or in March where we could do it at no cost? Because what is going to be the cost and how much time is it going to take if we wait to see if this moves forward? It'll be probably not in an election year. So we'll have to come up with the funding to fund a special election. Why not have it on this ballot, asking whether or not we should move forward?
That's a good question, Joe. Alderman Vaccaro. This bill does not necessitate a vote, okay?
Yeah, it does. It says right back here.
It necessitates a
It's
vote.
got language ballot on it. It's got ballot language on it with the vote yes or no.
It necessitates a vote only in the event that the city decides to move forward with the privatization of Lambert International Airport, details of which the general public doesn't have now by any stretch of the imagination. The general public is absolutely unequipped right now to vote on such an initiative for which they know absolutely nothing about.
I
And so
understand,
we
but why
cannot
not?
put it on a ballot
Why
until
wouldn't it-
we know the timeline that is proposed to privatize our airport, and only in the event that we privatize it. And this bill doesn't ask for the privatization of Lambert International Airport, nor does it suggest that we should move forward with that. And therefore, there is no fiscal note, there is no cost associated with moving forward with a public vote in the event that the privatization process moves forward.
I understand, which means it would be a special election, which would cost something. You would have to, at the beginning of each budget year, you would have to put money in the budget and hold it in the event of a special election. Why wouldn't we put this on a ballot asking if we should even move forward
There is
with it?
no way that the public can weigh in on a process that they know absolutely nothing about. We know next to nothing about the process right now. I would not be able to, in good faith, be able to ask the general public to weigh in on this. And,
Oh,
let me just say this, a public vote would cost, an election could cost somewhere around the ballpark of $150,000 or something like that.
I think it's more, but
$220,000. By last accounts, the consultants on this project are expending close to $1 million a month on the process thus far. That is a drop in the bucket.
and I
for-
understand, but the city's not going to be the one responsible for that money, because I asked
City
it.
is gonna be
no,
responsible for the money.
I
If the
a-
private city goes through.
I asked at that last meeting, at the transportation meeting last week, what happens if we vote this thing down or hold it up? Are we going to be liable for that money that they're expending? They said no. Now, I figure I'll look further into it, but they said that if we don't move forward, even if they find someone, what's the question, the way I posed it? You can go back and look.
So Alderman Vaquero, the contract that has been signed by the city that is in effect right now very clearly states that the consultants that are expending that $800,000 a month right now will be repaid out of the proceeds of the privatization of the airport should that contract go through. That is
Right.
very clear.
I understand
And that
that.
would be paid for out of the proceeds of the public asset that the city of St. Louis currently owns and therefore would be paid for by the city of St. Louis.
And I understand what you're saying, but I also, if we put it to a vote and it doesn't go through, they vote it down, I asked, would we be in like breach of contract, and would we be responsible for paying back that money if they find somebody willing? And the answer was no. My whole thing on this is, one, there should be a fiscal note on all bills, because it should be, in the event that we do it that way, the cost of an election is part of a fiscal note. That's what I believe, what I was told, and
Joe, I agree with you, but that fiscal note would be attached to the bill that would provoke a public vote. This bill, in and of itself,
It's got the
does
ballot.
not provoke a public vote. It provokes a public vote should something else happen. And if that something else happens, we will take that fiscal note and we'll put it on that next bill.
I think that the bill should be on the, I know what you're saying, but I think it should simply say, should the city even be moving forward? I would say, if you ask people in this room without any knowledge whatsoever, do they think that we should even be moving forward and looking at this? I think the answer you're going to get is no. So why would we want to move forward through this whole process?
It's a good question.
You know?
Alderman
What-
Vaquero, if
And it wouldn't
oh,
cost
if you
anything to
are-
put it on a ballot.
If you would like to amend the bill with that language, I would entertain such a conversation about it.
Well, I think that it should be. I think that doing it this way,
At this point, what I propose that we do is hold off on a public vote until we know whether or not we're moving forward. But I do appreciate that perspective, and I think that there's merit to it. And I think it might be worth a conversation. If you're willing to
think
introduce such an amendment, I would certainly entertain the conversation, and I believe the committee would do the same.
okay.
Is there anybody else that has an absolute question? Because I'd really like for the public to have the time. That's it? Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may, just one question.
Go right ahead, Alderman.
Alderwoman Spencer, I just have one question.
They look pretty good. I didn't know there were sandwiches. Are those for the public?
I heard Dan is selling them for $10 each.
$10. That's like a parking space out front.
In line 17, it says, whereas it is critical for the city voters to voice their opinion in a citywide election regarding any potential privatization or long-term lease of the airport. So there will only be a citywide vote if the city sells, or would there be a citywide vote if there's just any discussion about selling the airport?
Stop saying sale because you can't sell it.
Or lease, excuse me. Proper term would be lease.
So The intent, and I believe the legal interpretation, but I would leave that to the lawyers to determine, but the intent was that there would be a citywide vote, a citywide election in the event of a privatization or long-term lease of the airport. And the reason it was described as potential is because it isn't, it is not imminent at this point. That is the whereas clause, so it's sort of describing rather than, it's just sort of the rationale.
Okay. I have no further
It's in the
questions.
preamble, but yeah.
No further questions, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have your list? So we can call the names, please. So we have the list, the sheets sitting on top of each other.
It's blank.
Okay,
Are we gonna do one and the other, or are you gonna go back and forth?
I will go back and forth. It's not that many names, I think everybody get this.
Well, what,
Yeah, okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll go back and forth, one pro, one con on the list, okay? Is it Phoebe Love? Okay, I'm sorry. Come forward. She had to leave? Okay. Two scratch drawers. Adolphus Pruitt.
I mean, I get to go home early.
No, yeah, you
Madam
can.
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Adolphus Pruitt, President, St. Louis City NAACP, and of course I rise in opposition of the bill, not as relates to its content, but as its timing. Make sure I understand properly, Madam Chairman, if we are going through a process in which we're trying to formulate a document that details what our airport is in every aspect as relates to the income it generates, what assets it consists of, and that the ideal is to take all of that, to put it out in some form of RFP to see if those folk, those equity folk who have invested in ventures of this nature before have an interest in making the city an offer to enter into a public-private partnership to operate Lambert. In the past, the Alderman mentioned Puerto Rico, which is one that was done. Puerto Rico went for $2.6 billion. The island got $615 million of that up front. While there are other airports that have not done this particular process, they are involved in public-private partnerships. Kansas City, $1.3 billion. New York, LaGuardia, $8 billion. Denver, $1.8 billion. The Cato Institute took a look at what Lambert potentially could fetch in the form of a partnership, and I want to repeat that. It is a partnership between a private entity and a public entity that Lambert potentially could yield in about $2.5 billion. I represent a city, and especially the minority population of this city who lives in a part of the city that has not received any significant investment that would change their lives and their neighborhoods around whatsoever. And it's impossible for it to come from anything other than some new public source. If you go back, American ran an article that I put out in January the 29th, 2017. It's outlined exactly what it is we thought should happen with this particular process, and it also included, at some point in time, when we have some idea of what a deal would look like, was to incorporate that deal into the charter so that we can control how those dollars are spent over the long run. Again, we are early. We need to let the folk do what they do. We need to put it out there and see what we can attract. And if we don't attract something that makes some sense, we don't have to do it. If we attract something that makes some sense, we need to be in a position to do it. And if we do a vote prior to doing that, it is sticking our heads in the sand and making a decision about what's going on around us. You don't know. We just don't know. And the city, and especially the folks I represent, deserve that opportunity. We deserve the opportunity to know if we can get that sort of investment, and then we deserve the opportunity to determine how that investment is spent. And that is what's most important, Madam Chairman. And I appreciate the committee's time.
I thank you very much. As I shared early on, we are not going to ask questions, okay? We will take into consideration what has been said, and we thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay.
And by the way, in Southwest, I mentioned Southwest, the most racist operating entity in the city of St. Louis and out there in Lambert. And as the president in ACP, we've been fighting it. And I'm embarrassed when anybody comes up here and gives Southwest any credit for anything. Southwest is a racist airline, and they operate that way.
All right. The next person on the list is Talia Earl. This is pretty.
My name is Talia Earl.
Talia,
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
I've been a resident here for 3 years, and I have grown to love this city despite its many faults, and partly because of the will and the power of its residents. St. Louis demands a vote on this. I demand a vote on this. Why are we demanding this? This will impact every single person in the city. You will be selling one of our greatest assets to a company that doesn't even care about us. The residents also demand a vote on this, as it will affect the contracts of our union's brothers and sisters. And I believe we all saw in August how the people voted for the unions. Please, as elected representatives of the people, please allow us the right to vote on this as we're demanding it. Thank you.
I thank you very much. The one thing I didn't say when I was giving how we were going to move forward is, anytime there's something that's very important in this process, I will give you the correct information very quickly. So, no, the airport will not be sold, and the law does not allow the airport to be sold. So know that that cannot happen, okay? And also, I ask you to go on the YouTube and look at the conversation with the business managers for the unions, for the employees that are represented at the airport. We have had a conversation with them. We'll continue to work with them. I'm for unions 3,000%, and I think most people here are. So we would never hurt union members or any other employee. The next person on the list is Reginald, and I'm not going to even try your last name. So, Reginald?
Okay, you told her.
Okay. Well, you can just speak pro. Yeah.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I actually mistakenly put my name on the wrong side there. I was
That's
just
quite all
wanted to
right.
make sure I understood everything. But my name is Reginald Garth. I'm a citizen of the 28th Ward, and thank you for holding this meeting, and to each of the distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for allowing the public to speak on this. So, in short, I feel that St. Louis does have a right to have a voice in what happens with the airport. As far as voting, we should be able to vote on that. One of the biggest issues, of course, with the city is that there's a lot of money that is being spent, and it seems that things aren't happening as well as they should. Much of the budget of the city is spent on public safety, but we still have one of the highest rates of crime. Much of the budget is spent on public safety, but yet we have an issue with homelessness. what does all this mean here for the airport? Well, if the airport generates most of that revenue, then what happens then if it's privatized? What then?
It doesn't.
Fair enough.
It doesn't.
But the thing of it all is that privatizing the airport it just simply looks as if, on the surface of everything, it looks as if it's not only just politicized, but it also looks as if like there's something that's being pulled over on the people of St. Louis who have voted and are taxpayers. And I feel that if something of this magnitude should be in the hands and the decisions of the people. That's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. The next person is Glenn Burley.
All right, folks. Hi, everybody. My name is Glenn Burley. I live in Marine Villa. So I'm here to talk about a few things tonight, but primarily I want to speak to Alderman Vaccaro's idea. I think it's a great idea to move it up as soon as possible, but I also hear Mr. Pruitt's opinion that the group deserves the time to actually work on a deal so that folks know what we're voting on. So I think both of the men have very valid points. Now I want to kind of talk about a few things. Earlier there was said that we're having complete transparency about what all has been going on around outreach and stuff, but the public already knows that that's not entirely true, as the working group has talked about polling significantly, or at least Fly 314 has at the meetings, and yet the results of any of that polling have not been made public. And we know that that polling has been used to inform the literature that is currently being distributed door to door. And I understand that even Alderman Mohammed here has been confused as sale versus lease, and I think a lot of these parsing of words things doesn't do us much good. I think we're better just kind of talking straight, which is why I find it very strange that privatization doesn't appear once on the document that is being distributed door to door in our city. There are all kinds of euphemisms about leasing, investment partnerships, and numerous things, but the conversation that all of my neighbors see in the paper and elsewhere is about privatization. So when folks walk up on their door and start talking about this, I don't even know how many people understand it's the same conversation. Okay? And I should also point out that most of the things in here are either currently the rules at Lambert or could easily be made the rules at Lambert without any privatization. So prohibitions against sale, already the rule, right, that we're currently functioning under. Paying off all airport-related debt. I mean, we know what they've done in Heathrow and London is they've simply folded that debt over. So when Ferrovial, that Mayor Slade's firm is working for, former Mayor Slade's firm is working for, took over Heathrow, that airport had a $6 billion debt load. It's currently at $13 billion. So the $6 billion of upgrade that they did, they haven't even begun paying that back, and they've been in there for years, okay? So I just want to say that. Obviously, keeping contracts and collective bargaining stuff, we're on much better footing with the city being in that position, as we have seen in privatization. Once again, in Heathrow, they have stopped new employees from being a part of the retirement pool and pension system that they had set up beforehand. So, just keeping going, discrimination against, prohibitions against discrimination, that's federal law. So if that's currently not happening, then, that's definitely something that should be taken up with the airport. But, Southwest and their internal issues, that is their internal business. And it also in this, it never makes apparent where the money is going to come from, and where we've seen in all situations is that the money has to come from somewhere. If we're keeping all the labor contracts and everything, the only way that there's a profit to be made is in increasing service fees, either to us as the customers, paying more in parking, or more at the concessionary as their leases or their rents are increased to increase profit levels there. Also, we've had great growth at the airport, and one of the big parts of that is us keeping our gate fees low. Okay, and one of the main things that they do in these situations is raise the gate fees to make more money for their profits.
I'm going to stop it now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, your 3 minutes were up, but you had some very good points that you were pointing out, and I want to share with you how that information, where that information came from for the door flyer. That's the exact information that was on the application that was submitted to the FAA for us to get approval to move forward. they ask you, what are your guiding principles? What are you looking at? And so that's the exact information that's on that document. We didn't want to do anything different because you want to stay on an even, happy place with FAA. You can't make up different things and put them out there to the public. So that's where those 11 guiding principles came from. And I do agree with having the opportunity for people to have input in as many ways as possible. And what most people don't know is we've only been in an operational mode for 45 days. This expiration process is expected to be 18 months to 2 years. So I have people that have texted me in my ward, and what I ask them to do is to stay present in the process, continue to look at information, continue to follow the process, all of that, because we can't make a decision just on our own. There are 5 entities that must agree on any decision, whether it's yes or no, and those 5 entities are the FAA, 65% of the airline service that's provided, which primarily Southwest has the most, the Transportation Committee, the Board of Aldermen, and the Board of E&A. So that's a lot of bodies, and they all have to agree. So all I've ever said from day one is, good luck in the city of St. Louis to have 5 bodies to agree on something. But as we, yeah, we can't get 5 people to agree on anything. So I just wanted to let you know that is the part of the process in case you haven't read it or heard it anywhere. The next person is Christopher Adelino. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm a resident and voter in the 8th Ward. I'd like to thank the board and the committee for allowing us the opportunity to speak tonight. So I think we know that whatever other assumptions we want to make about the people bidding to privatize, lease the airport, what they want is, what they're looking for is to make a profit somehow, make money out of this. They're not doing it, for humanitarian reasons. And as Glenn kind of alluded to, this profit can't just materialize out of thin air. International airports aren't like restaurants or stores. You can't just come into a market and build one to compete. It's a pretty closed market, so the money has to kind of come out of 2 places, either the pockets of residents and people using the airport in the form of service fees or otherwise, passed on to the consumer, or the wages of the people that work at the airport have to be pushed down. As we've seen other privatization schemes and other municipal assets be privatized across the country, what we inevitably see are these sort of exotic ploys that kind of look through loopholes in the contracts to get money in ways that aren't necessarily apparent when the deal goes through. If people have heard about the Chicago parking meter deal, there's countless other examples across the country. So, of course, we should wait to see how this deal is outlined before we get a vote, but we should also be cognizant that no matter what, there's going to be some way they're going to try to make a profit out of this, and people who are getting paid to figure out how to make that profit are going to make it very difficult for lay people and the voters to figure out how they're doing that. So I think what we should be looking for is giving the most people, the greatest people, the people who are being affected, who are either going to be passed on those fees or have their wages tamped down, the opportunity to have a say in this decision, and it should be put to their vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm not doing well here. Lauren, is it Pyatt? Okay.
My name is Lauren Pyatt. I'm also live in the 8th Ward and vote in the 8th Ward, and I'm here to speak out against the privatization of the airport. I'm also here to speak out against the propaganda, billionaire-generated propaganda that tells us that the privatization of the airport will be good for anyone except for the fat cat experts who tell us that this is somehow good for people and who only make money if this deal goes through. So I ask you, please, to think about the privatization and that this is an irresponsible and dangerous way for us to try and solve the fiscal issues of the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I probably agree more than anybody else about how the information is disseminated. Again, if you go and look at the meetings that have been taped, all of them have been taped. I hope I haven't embarrassed any of my constituents or anybody else in the city, but I'm very tough on folks because I'm not going to allow information to go out that is so convoluted you don't have a clue what it's saying. So we've pulled back on things and changed things, and you will see that. Plus, we changed some rules of operation. So the working group that represents the city of St. Louis and you, everything has to come through us before it is put out to the public. That's a necessary. It's just a necessary. I can't have someone leading you in any direction. This has to be a very neutral process. It has to be as simple as possible in the language so that you'll know exactly where we are and what we're doing. And so you will see that as you go forward in this. As I shared with you, we're only 45 days in. The next person is Nick Dune.
They covered it.
They covered it? All right, sir. Matt Schmidt.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
So one thing that I haven't heard discussed here that is bubbling around in my brain, this is supposed to be a negotiation, right? You're a negotiation with whoever buys the
No,
airport?
absolutely not.
No, like the process. is supposed to-
Absolutely not.
You're not negotiating with the people who are going to buy the airport?
Absolutely not.
The city isn't negotiating?
It's a study.
There will be, at some point, a deal, right?
We don't know that. We may never even decide we want a deal. We've
My-
got to do the exploration first. We need to have information in front of us. We need to analyze the information. And then all these parties that are involved, that are the investor, every concession person, the airlines, everybody has to be involved. So no, we're not going to step out front and talk about negotiating anything.
Well, that's actually kind of my point, is that all those folks are going to be involved. It's going to be a big negotiation between everybody. And
If it comes to that.
Yeah.
that is, your position is strengthened if you have to say at the end of the day, I got to take this back to my people for a vote. That's all my point is that voting for this amendment, which is only an amendment or a bill that if, before the airport gets privatized, it goes to the citizens for a vote. For y'all that are going to get to conduct the negotiations, that's a point for you. You could just say, hey, I might be okay with that, but I got to take it back to my people. So I think that this bill, if you really want to privatize the airport and get the best benefit for the city possible, that's a real point in your favor in those negotiations. That's all I'm saying about that. My second point is, maybe y'all want cover. You know, voting for sending it to the people versus voting to privatize it plays way different for the voters. And that's a real consideration that not just this committee, but the other members of the board that I see here watching need to take into consideration. You're not going to face any pushback from us if you vote to privatize, if the citizens get to vote, because then we got our choice. People are going to get real mad if you vote to privatize and we never got a say in it. So again, it's win-win for y'all who are on the Board of Aldermen. That's all I'm saying. And as the treasurer of St. Louis Not for Sale, which has a petition drive, a bill that's substantially similar to this, just to give you guys an update. I think we got 1,500 right now. And if anybody here wants to get signatures for us on Election Day, one person volunteering for 1 hour can get 30 signatures. So sign up online. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. That was good. So I'm glad you brought it up and explained it that way, because just for instance, if the citizens voted and decided that they wanted to privatize it, and then all of the stakeholders at the airport, the concessionaires, the airlines, and the FAA says, don't move forward, then what do we do? So just think about it all the way around. That's all I'm saying. The next person here is Reese, is it Forbes? Okay.
R-E-E-S-E-F-O-R-B-E-S. I live in the Central End.
Hold the microphone up so we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. How's that? I live in the Central West End, 6108. And
You need to step closer to it or pull it closer to you somehow. Yeah.
I live in the Central West End. Name is Reese Forbes. I am for putting this proposition to the voters, but it is very complicated, as Alderman Spencer's document showed. I think many people need to read that. And so, you know, the vote could be like 2 years from now, because it's something that cannot be taken lightly at all. I am, though, as a veteran, Army veteran, totally against privatizing the airport. I find that, whether it is a lease or a sale, could at some point in the future be a security risk. If you remember, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, Chinese landed a cargo plane out at the airport, and their military personnel got off with automatic weapons. People were rather upset about that, which I would be rather upset myself. Once something is privatized or a lease that's not extremely strict, I have rental properties. It's hard to make a strict lease and keep people to those leases. Most anything could happen. It could eventually be leased or owned by China or Russia. It could be turned into almost anything at all if the lease is not quite right. That's very problematic to me. I think it should stay a public entity. I've flown out of that thousands of times, have no problems, and I like it. It should be expanded. There is a lot of area there that I remember that I'm taking houses down that I remember very well, and that's just vacant now. And someone was mentioning about, you know, Metrolink over to the other side of the river. Wonderful idea. But it needs to stay a public entity. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir, very much. I forgot to share with you that when we were talking about union employees, out of the 650 plus employees at the airport, only a little over 50 are unionized. And the privatization part of it, we have so many of the services already privatized at the airport, like the big things like food and all those other things, the cleaning of it, all kinds of things. They already are privatized. And some people, yeah, fuel, everything. Yeah. Well, you know, some people use the other terminology that's not so rough. They call it outsourcing. And so these things have been moving forward for years, and it will continue probably to move forward. Whether we ever follow through at the end on this, doing anything, we may not do anything. We don't know enough now to even talk about the end, which is another thing that I've made sure that the people who are advisors don't talk about the end, because there is no end right now. We don't know enough to be talking about anything at the end. We need a lot of information in front of us. We need a lot of input from a lot of entities first, and we are not going to get ahead of this process talking about the end, because there is no end right now. It's only structure in place to gather information. It's an exploration process, just like anybody else's job would do that would come in and analyze a department to see if it's working well. Sometimes you do nothing, sometimes you change some things, sometimes you close that whole department down. So that's the exploration part of this that we want to look at and get information. And I beg you to stay present in the process. The next person here is Derek, is it Nooner? Okay.
I had a whole thing to say, but a lot of it's been covered.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to commend you because the city website is very transparent. Fly 314 is not. And they had the
It
option.
will be in a minute.
Okay, well, a minite should have been, and this isn't against you, but a minute should have been when it started. And if Fly 314 really wanted to be transparent, it would have been a 501c3 and not 4, so that all of its expenses and its general contributions would be made public. But that's neither here nor there. But I do agree, I commend you on making sure that the public does have access to meetings with the airport officials, which we're not generally invited to. But I wanted to bring up a different issue that passed a couple years ago when we were asked about the MLS stadium. And you asked, well, what if the board approves something, but the voters come back and say otherwise? What do we do? Well, I think ultimately, if the voters say we would be interested in privatizing, the FAA says that's not something. I mean, the process has to kind of go in a different direction. And you ask voters' approval for a project that comparing the two was so much smaller. So why wouldn't you ask for our approval for this as well? You talked about 5 parties. Why can't there be 6? I think everybody in this room, I think the general feeling in this room is that this process should have never started in the first place, but it has. And I think what we really want, and what I think Alderwoman Spencer is getting at, is there needs to be another voice, and it needs to be the public who ultimately own the airport. And that before it is moved into private hands, that we have a chance to ask that. And if the consultants say, if whomever says, well, that's a negative, if you allow the voters to say something, that's going to dim your prospect of privatizing it, then they should never have been involved in the first place, because they don't have the best interest of the city at heart. They're looking out for themselves. And so I would just ask the committee to remember, if this really is a 2-year process, there are hopefully a lot of elections left to come. I assume that we're going to continue voting after 2018. I hope so. There are plenty of opportunities then to put this in front of voters and to say, we're adding a 6th party. We're going to allow the city to have a say. And maybe it's, maybe that breaks the process apart. But I think that as Democratic representatives, you have to say to them, that's the best interest for the city. So I thank you for your time and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Hopefully, as we move forward with the various outreach opportunities that will be there, we can get closer to understanding what the public wants. And after we learn something, because we really don't, and I'm including myself, I don't know enough to formulate any decision. But as we move forward, those people, including St. Louis County, they will also be surveyed as well. It's a regional project, so we have such a long way to go. I think at this point, and this information will be on the portal for the working group for the city as well as 314, they're putting the report together on what they have done the last, I think it's like 3 weeks or so, they've been out in the community. I do know that as of last Friday, they had already done over 25,000 responses from doors. They had really done more doors than that, but 25,000 responses already. And so for those who don't know or have not had the opportunity to have this information available to you, it is a parallel process. So we're not just doing south and then go north. We're doing all of the city at the same time. So that to me is another fair way of making sure that every part of the city is getting surveyed at the same time versus getting an opinion from one side, getting an opinion from another side later on. And you want it all at the same time. So that is what is taking place now. And there'll be a number of other ways that I think you will agree on. Our next person is it Damian Johnson? Okay. Damian, you went to St. Louis Public Schools. But that's still public, and we teach y'all how to print. We don't teach writing anymore in public schools, but that's okay.
Yeah, print, okay. I did print. No,
right.
Kara's printer, never mind.
Yeah, I like you though, go ahead.
Thank you. One topic they didn't talk about is security. We used to have a privatized security force at the airports until the Bush administration, and it went public after 9/11.
Went federal.
Federal, well, still went federal. So my issue or concern is, we do privatize. Then what? How will we hold the officers accountable? What training will they have? Will they have the least amount of training as possible, or are we going to require them to require the same professional training that police officers have? Will they have to hire former police officers? Would it be a Blackwater contract? So that's one of the reasons why I would like to have a vote, because then we could ask these questions about security at private airport, whatever they propose on it. I also would like to point out that I do have with me the official survey by voters when they signed my petition to require voter approval before they privatize the airport, wherever they get on the ballot. So I think this is a real receptive about this. I don't think either Kara's bill or this will need to have a fiscal statement, because there's no bill yet. So that's one angle. I think voters should have a say. If privatized airport is a good thing, then the next thing what I would like to know is, why isn't we having a rich guy just buying land and building his own airport? That's a question that I will ask if we ever move forward through this. So.
Okay. All right. Is there something else?
Oh, not at this time. So, did you have any? Oh, I guess.
Okay. So let me share with you that the TSA, no one can remove that.
Right.
Okay.
That's federal.
That's federal.
Right.
It will stay in place.
Okay.
It is the same all over the country, and it will stay in place. So don't worry about that. That's not going anywhere. By law, it can't go anywhere. So it's going to be there. TSA will continue to be there in place, so that no one can change that. No one.
Okay, I guess there's probably other things that will be of concerning that I think, there are other things that will be of concerning to the public that I think they should come to a public vote. Doesn't the TSA still work with some private security somewhat?
I know nothing about that because it's all federal.
All federal?
Yeah. You
So-
remember when, after the
Airplane?
911
Yes.
and all that, and so Homeland Security
Yes.
is over that operation, and it's a federal operation for all airports, and the rules come down through.
Through federal.
We can't touch that.
Right.
No one can.
Right, and so does this private airport here. This is also a federal program as well, like.
No.
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 What I mean.
No. And that was something that I didn't know either until the FAA came in and explained it to us, what their responsibilities are. So they make sure that you make no stupid decisions.
Right.
That will hurt the airport's operation or safety.
Right.
They are oversight, okay?
Right.
So even if you had a wild idea, they are oversight, and you will not be able to do it because
Right.
you have to get approval.
Through-
And that's
through the
why
airport.
they are watchdogs over this process.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the process, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so feel comfortable about that, okay?
Okay.
All right. So that is our last speaker. What I would like to do, oh, I'm sorry, that's all I got right here.
I apologize, I did not get a chance to sign, but I'd like to speak.
You signed somewhere, I saw you. Where did you sign?
I put Matt's name on because he was parking,
But now you want to speak?
if you would allow it.
How many more people want to speak because I can't go? Just two. Oh, just two?
Three.
Three? Okay. So I'm going to take you.
Do you want to have them?
I need you to sign, okay? I know I saw you writing on there. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. No, I had to fudge his address a little bit.
Oh, okay. Remember, if there's anything that you need, Lisa's sitting here. Give her your information so we can get that to you, whatever it is you think you need.
My name's Joe Auger. I live in the
We need the paper.
15th.
No, they got to sign when they come
I
in.
live in the 15th ward. I think it's a prudent thing to consider public vote at the end. I think most of it, I mean, the discussion in this room tonight is missing what I think is a more glaring issue, which is that two people in this building, the mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen, selected an agreement with consultants and the consultants are paying with money that we would eventually reimburse them for leafleting that is, I won't say propaganda, but is not unbiased. This just all kinds of, it's just double dealing. And I keep thinking of like, I've been hearing about this guy that's trying to get a job in DC. I don't know if anybody's hearing it. And we're talking about, did he sharpen his pencils or not? And this and that. When the reality is, I wouldn't hire the guy to be an Uber driver. I don't think we need to talk about whether he should be whatever. And so for us to talk about 24 months down the line, if my math is correct, that's $19,200,000 at $800,000 a month. And then we're just going to go, oops, I guess we spent $19 million if the deal goes through. I would have liked to had some transparency on who those people were. And there was none. Mayor, President Board of Aldermen, 2 votes, So how any of us in the room can have a straight face and feel like going forward, this is an open process. I either never want to play poker with you, any of us, or I want to sell you a lot of cars, because it's nonsense. We can talk about, I think the Titanic should have had decaf coffee. But I also think they shouldn't have let the fire make the iron brittle and driven into an iceberg. And so for us to talk about what to do in 2 years, the horse is out of the barn by then. And we're not going to get good information from the consultants. The consultants they're going to get what they want. Poker, cars, Uber, decaf, straight face. I have a brother, Mark Auger, who has visited rooms like this many times. He was talking for 10 years about Paul McKee and Northside Development before my alderwoman or the newspaper thought it was interesting. I kind of think he's a blowhard. He wasn't wrong about all of that for 10 years before anyone in this room would acknowledge that. If you want to see a lot more Augers in here, do stuff like this and we'll all be talking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. You had some valid points, and what I want to share with you is that the Board of E&A is 3 representatives, and even though the vote for the comptroller's office wasn't there, but they were very present throughout the entire process. And so they do know what was going on. And what you also probably don't know, because you haven't had an opportunity to really look at the website and see what's been going on the last 45 days, is that the comptroller's office has representatives to watch the process as well, separately from those advisors. So the information that we will use will be agreed upon by the comptroller's office, who I give the ultimate respect to. And I also share, and I will tell you this too, that I don't believe that our comptroller should have to make a stance on anything like this, because that's your financial watchdog. A financial watchdog should sit back here and watch and analyze and make sure everything is okay before they come forward at the end to determine whether or not we should be doing something, if it is in our best interest monetarily. So that's how that process should work. And what we know is our comptroller, Darlene Green, has always made sure that she was not in the wrong position, but only in the position to protect us, oversee what is going on, and then make a decision when the time is right. So I respect her. Her representative is a part of the working group as well. So if there's anything that needs to be done, Jim Garavelli is sitting there, and he will quickly let us know. So that part of it you can feel comfortable about. Also, at the very end here, I want to take about 10 minutes. I think it's 10 of us.
Have we heard everybody?
Oh, yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You wanted to speak, and I was about to end it. Come on, come on, come on, come on. And you still wanted to speak, too. I got it now. Okay.
I'm real short.
Hold the bottom of it down.
Yeah, then pull it down. There you go.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, I'm Josie Grillis, and I live in Southwest Garden. And I would like to thank you, Madam Chairwoman, both for letting me speak since I forgot to sign in, and also members of the committee as well for having this hearing at night when we could attend if we are at work during normal daytimes. I just want to start by saying I have grave concerns about this process, mostly because of the RFP process and the consultancy group which was chosen, which other industry insiders have described as an unethical and highly unusual RFP process and pay process. But I'm not actually here tonight to argue about you with privatization or not, and that is not the purpose of Board Bill 93. So I'm here to voice my support for Board Bill 93. And also to agree with Alderman Vaccaro that we should put this on the ballot as fast as possible, and I think March is great. But I would just like to ask you all, as members of the committee, to think about the citizens and to give us the chance of having a voice. And I understand that this is possibly a 2-year process, and that the consultancy group will come up with its own recommendations, and that there will be a process to educate the public. And I don't think that that means that we don't need to take any action before that happens. There is nothing to preclude support for Board Bill 93 or support for citizens voting. It is not contingent upon the completion of the study. And so that is why I would like to urge you all to support Board Bill 93. And if you're not sure that you can do that yet, and if you're not entirely sure what you want your vote to be, I'm here to just offer you the opportunity to sign the petition that citizens are collecting signatures for, which closely mimics the language on Board Bill 93. Because at the end of the day, I think that we need to give the citizens and the voters of this city a say in what happens to our largest asset. And so, if anybody would like to sign this petition, I'm here. I'll take your signature right now. And also, I would like to let people know that we are having an informative meeting at the Fortune Teller Bar on Cherokee tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. for people who would like to learn more about our petition and about the possible consequences of privatization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Would you like to sign, Ms. Davis?
Absolutely not. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't put myself in predicaments, okay? Where's it? There you are, sir. Come on.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this final word. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Mark Byrne. I've been a registered voter in the city of St. Louis since 2000. And this past year, I came to St. Louis to work in international programs at Webster University and then at Washington University in St. Louis. I've spent the last year in Berlin, Germany, studying airport infrastructure and the establishment of the Berlin Airport Authority in the 1920s, which is what I'm writing my dissertation on. I'm very happy to come back to St. Louis and to find this conversation taking place. I have very little to say about this proposal right now, but I just wanted to say that thank you for holding these public hearings to receive our input, and you will be seeing me again once I have once I've informed myself and taken the opportunity to review the literature that's available and take a look at the meetings that are available on YouTube. So I just wanted to get my face in front of you and say, I'll see you again, and thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to thank you too. You're probably smarter than any of us in the room at the moment. I wanted about airports, so that's pretty good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. As I was getting ready to say, because we had talked about ending this at 8:15, and I wanted to.
Everybody know?
I think we caught everybody now. Those were the 3 hands that were up.
Okay.
So I wanted to go down the list here of all the persons. You got a minute or less if you want. If it's just something that you just got to say, and because I need to capture. I think I've got about 5 other alderpersons here, and I want to capture them as well. So Alderman Vaccaro.
Yeah, a couple things, and I'll be brief. The bill does nothing. That's why my name's not on it. This bill says, gee, if something happens a year or 2 from now, we'll get together, we'll put a bill together that'll take roughly, by the time you get on a ballot, 6 months. This bill in itself does nothing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is when you talk about the literature that's being put on the doors, it is not fair and equitable because they did it off a voter list. Some wards are getting less than 200, where other wards are getting upwards of 1,000. The papers were given to us at the meeting. You can go online and look at it. But it isn't being, that door hanger is not being put on everybody's door. The makeup of the Board of Aldermen since there's elections in April obviously could change from what it is now. And this bill just says, gee, you know what, a year or 2 from now, if they get a thing put together, we'll hold a board, we'll put a bill together. This bill does nothing. That's why my name's not on it. People say, why is your name on it? Well, it does nothing. It says, gee, 2 years from now, a year from now, whatever. If it happens, we're going to put a board bill together. It's going to take about, well, minimum 6 weeks, but 8 weeks. Then you got 90 days to put it on a ballot. So, you're talking, and that's even if we're in session. If everything going really as good as it could, if this were to go down, we would take roughly 6 months to get this to a ballot. This just says, gee, you know what, if it comes down to it, we'll put it on a ballot. It does nothing. It's more for show than anything. It's just my opinion. And again, you can go back, look at the tape of the meeting. Them door hangers that supposedly are being equitable in areas that don't have the voter turnout, they're not getting the door hangers. It goes anywhere from 200 in some wards to as much as, like my ward's a heavier voting ward, we get 1,200 door hangers. So don't believe it's fair and equitable. It's not. It's being distributed. If it's fair and equitable, then the same amount of flyers would go out in every ward, not just selectively in some. And this is what happened when they decided they wanted to reduce the amount of aldermen. It was very selective in where they did their literature.
I thank you so much, Alderman Vaccaro, and I shall clarify. The numbers that he's talking about is the minimum amount of responses from each ward based on the number of people who voted. But every single door in the city of St. Louis will be knocked on. Every single door. So that is a must. We required it, and it will happen. And based on what I know and see and hear from my constituency, if they've been on a block, every door was knocked on. the neighborhood, the entire neighborhood has been done. So every single door will be knocked on. That's just a minimum to show us what it would look like for responses based on the voting that was done in the last election. So you want to look at that list, and it'll be online. I'll have all that online for you in the next few days. And I'm due to get another report to you. As you know, we have to report every 60 days. We did the report in the Transportation Committee, whenever that was, a week ago. It's online. Alderman Cone.
I have no questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Alderman Cone is the vice chair of this committee. I thank him for helping. Alderwoman Howard.
I just want to thank people for coming out tonight and expressing their opinions and having their voice. And if you know people that are interested, please pass the word along for the next meeting on October 13th. I think this is an important process, and I think being aware of what's going on and the advantage or the disadvantage of what this proposal is a process of education. And I think that as it unfolds, I think we will see what we want to do. That's all I have to say. And again, thank you for coming out tonight.
Okay. Alderman Muhammad.
No comments, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Alderwoman Middlebrook. No comments. Okay. Who's over here? Alderwoman Murphy. Okay. I can't see back here. Okay. So Alderwoman Green. Okay.
Gunther.
Alderman Gunther. Is anybody else back here? Okay. Okay, Alderwoman Rice. Okay.
Tom Owen.
All right, Alderman Oldenburg, thank you so much for being here. Alderwoman Navarro, I see you back there. You okay?
Alderman Ogilvy.
Ogilvy somewhere with his child.
All right, thank you, Alderman Ogilvy, for coming. All right, so in order for us to wrap up here, I took a couple of more notes of things that I like to give people homework, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do is please stay present in the process. I think that's critical. When you see us with a misstep, our emails are very public. Send me one. Also, make sure that you have an opportunity to not just say something for the sake of saying it, but have the information. And all of it is out there available to you. And my St. Louis County and the other parts of the region will be included in asking their opinions for this process. And remember, it's about airport management. And I'm going to say this because I'm brutally honest. I'll probably get a whole bunch of little nasty emails and twits about it. But at the end of the day, I think it's terribly misleading to have something that says not for sale. The airport cannot be sold. The airport will not be sold. And I just think that's a little disingenuous. Also, we wanted to make sure that in this process, we will continue to have as many public forums as possible. So this public hearing on this bill, there will again be 2 more hearings. One will be October 13th, that's a Saturday, 10 a.m. at St. John the Baptist at 4200 Delore, and October 15th, that's a Monday, at Greater Pentecostal at 6080 West Florissant, and that is at 6:30 a.m. So again, I thank all of you for coming. I think it's important that you're, I'm sorry, that's me, I'm up working. 6:30 p.m., okay. And I learned to stop answering people's emails at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning because then they want to talk all night. Here is the last thing is, as I have been a process of volunteering for the last 30-some years in this city, whether it was with the public school system, when my children were in school, or any other body, I always had a lot of trust for the people that I elected to be on boards or represent me in any kind of way. I will question them. I will hold their feet to the fire. But if for some reason your system is not what you want it to be, then maybe you need to do something different. So if we're going to vote on everything, there's really no reason for any of us to be here. You asked us to represent you, and I hope that somehow, some way, you can have some trust at some point. But until that day happens, we're going to continue to do it this way and have everybody involved. I thank you for coming tonight.